There was a lot of hoopla and there was a lot of excitement around the James Harden trade, obviously in combination with their acquisitions of Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant last year. But we've seen that the big three in Brooklyn has kind of not necessarily gotten off to the ideal start, to the best start. We've seen them drop their last three in a row, including their last game to the Detroit Pistons. Saw Jeremy Grant go off, the ex-Denver Nugget. So what do you think? Do you think this is the real Brooklyn team, or do you think this is maybe just a phase, kind of the growing pains of getting the big three gelling together and the team overall gelling together?
Before I talk about the Nets, I do want to give Jeremy Grant a big shout out. The guy has the guy has absolutely balled out. Everybody was questioning his decision to leave Denver Nuggets on a contender team. He had a key role on that team, and he's come to the Detroit Pistons. They've had some injuries. The guys have been handling the ball.
He said he wanted to be the guy.
He wanted to be the guy, and he knew what he had, the talent he had, and he's absolutely balled out this season. I don't think anybody questions his decision anymore. But I think people, on the other hand, are probably questioning Denver's decision to let him go and not pay him more. Coming back to the Nets now. I don't want to really say I told you so, but I kind of we discussed this. We discussed this previously, and I kind of forecasted this, where I thought they would have some growing pains because they absolutely played no defense. Teams can easily put 120 on them, although it is the new NBA, but still letting someone score 120 on a consistent basis is not the recipe to win.
Feels like every game they gave up 120.
Yeah, that's literally it. Like I think they gave up 117 a few days ago, but that's as close as they get. As close as that's the best defense they'll
Their
play.
best defensive performance.
So that we know that's not a recipe, to win. As good as your offense can be, your good offense can be the best in the world, best of all time, which has been on track for that. You're still not going to win if you have statistically the worst defense since the James Harden trade in NBA history. You're on track for that. While at the same time you're on track to be the best offense, but those two things are really not going to mesh, because what happens when you give up easy baskets to some role players on the other team? Their confidence grows, and if their confidence grows, they're just going to hit more shots as the game goes on. Eventually, at the end, they'll have better execution at the end because they can actually play defense. Where you can't play defense, your role players are in no rhythm because they haven't had any confidence. All you have is James Harden and Kyrie Irving going one-on-one solo ball. And then we've seen Kevin Durant's been out for the last few games, of course, with his health and safety issues. There was a big drama about that. But overall, like it's just a bunch of ball hogs at the end of the day who want to win, but they want to win their way. Like although all have said we got to sacrifice for each other, so we all have to sacrifice, or at least one guy has to sacrifice. But then at the end of the day, you see what's happening. They want to sacrifice, but it's like I want to sacrifice what I want to sacrifice. So I'm willing to score like 2 less points, but that may not necessarily be the best thing for your team. Or I'm willing to touch the ball a little bit less, but that's not necessarily the best thing. If even one of you guys decide to play defense, they'll set a better example for your teammates and other role players who will maybe follow your lead and take you up on our challenge, and then also play some kind of defense. If you can't expect someone else, another teammate of yours, to play defense and call them out for it when you don't play defense yourself. So that's just where I am. But I kind of saw this, but I don't think they're as bad as they've looked the last few games, just because Kevin Durant's not there. Kevin Durant's that all be it all. He can do it all around player, doesn't need the ball in his hands, can do it all offensively, defensively, with the ball, without the ball, off the ball. And he's the guy who can actually hold other teammates accountable on defensive and even. So I think they will get better, but I still don't believe in them. I thought they would be the top 3. I would say they're fringing on the top 4 teams in the East at this point. They could even drop further down.
My boys got 3 to 4 better teams than the Brooklyn Nets.
How they have looked. That's I think 76ers.
He's got 3 to 4 better teams than the team with Kevin Durant on it. I think you hit the nail right on the head there at the end. You're absolutely right. The Nets defense has suffered terribly. as you mentioned, on track to being the worst defense in NBA history since the James Harden trade. But I think we all knew this was coming, especially with the players that they had to give up to acquire James Harden. But as you said right at the end, they've been struggling because Kevin Durant hasn't been in the lineup. And I think that's all that there is to it. This is still early on in terms of the Big Three era. We saw that when LeBron first went to South Beach with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, they struggled to win some games early. A lot of people were kind of thinking that the experiment wasn't really going to work out. They ended up going to the NBA Finals that year before LeBron had his epic collapse that we've all heard about, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you have to give this team more time, number one. And number two, I think people are forgetting how impactful or how great of a player Kevin Durant is. Kevin Durant is probably the second, if not the best player on the planet. And I know that everyone's going to hate on me for saying that. Well, he has that same type of impact when he's on the floor on a team. So, for me, this is just a rough stretch of games. This is just Steve Nash, the coaching staff, and the players kind of figuring each other out, figuring out their best way to either implement team defense or to just get used to each other on defense, kind of feel each other out. I think given enough time, and once Kevin Durant comes back, this team is going to be up and at 'em. I think they're definitely going to be within the top three in the East. I don't think this is going to be a question in come playoff time. I think this is going to be a completely different. This is going to be a completely different looking team than they look right now. That they've looked late.
Had in Miami with LeBron, Wade, and Chris Bosh, they were all two-way players. You cannot say one of them was just a one-way player. So they could demand that from each other. And they could have struggles, but at the end of the day, you knew if my offensive game is not on tonight, my defensive game will be on. See, one part of this whole the Nets team I completely forgot to mention was a coaching staff. Steve Nash, not a defender. Mike D'Antoni, Mike Antoni. So really, really, like, where's that going to come down from? Kevin Durant's the only guy on the team who's going to be like, let's play defense. The coaches can stress it. They probably don't even know how to play defense themselves. So how are they going to coach it? And then, of course, players, Kyrie and Harden cannot never ask anyone else to play defense when they don't play defense on their own. So, like, I don't think this is something that's just going to kind of go away. Well, the play 2 weeks ago where I think Kyrie Irving said, I can't defend a stick right now.
When could he?
When could he? Exactly. Like, when could you, man? Like, what are you talking about?
That's not news.
Right, and he hasn't
moved it right now.
Exactly, and he hasn't done it since. So it's not like, oh, he said that he made that statement, and ever since then he's been a sensational defender. If anything, he looks less disinterested even on offense now because James Harden handles most of the offensive responsibilities, and he has the ball in his hand. So I think Kyrie, I'm sure deep down, is probably not very pleased with that. He wants to be the guy who's running the show.
Two things. Number one, I only made the Big Three in Miami comparison in terms of their struggles early on and the time that it took to really kind of get that team gel together and figuring things out, firing on all cylinders before they made the finals. And number two, as you mentioned in your opening soliloquy, this is the modern NBA. Brooklyn is not going to have to be a top 5, top 10 defensive team to get to where they want to go. I don't necessarily think that they're championship favorites, but I definitely think that they can make it out of the East with their historic offense, even if their defense is lackluster. It is a slippery slope. You do have to have balance. And I think defense does win in the playoffs, especially when you have to face some really strong defensive teams, but also really strong offensive teams like the Milwaukees of the world, like the Philadelphias of the world. Those teams bring it on both ends of the court. And so what Brooklyn is essentially relying on is playing average to mediocre defense and their offense carrying them the rest of the way through.
Mediocre?
And I think when you have a player of Kev...
Do they even play mediocre defense?
That's what they're banking on in the future. Not saying that that's what they're playing right now. Okay. They're banking on the fact that they can pull it together enough to play mediocre to below average defense and to have their historic offense really pull them through. And I think with a player of the caliber of Kevin Durant, and again, this is all assuming that everyone stays healthy and everyone stays in their groove. With a player of a Kevin Durant caliber, I think you can definitely get away with that because of obviously the surroundings that you have them in with James Harden, with Kyrie Irving, and we know what they can do with the ball in their hands and on the offensive side of the floor. It was always going to be this for Brooklyn. It was always going to be a trade-off. Do you go all in for James Harden and throw away your best defender in Jared Allen. And they chose to pursue that win. I think that they can definitely win enough. I just don't think that it can translate to a championship the way that they're playing defense right now. It's definitely a concern.
Well, and at the end of the day, like you can have 10 great offensive players. There's only one ball to go around, and it also depends on what kind of offensive player are you. Are you like a Steph Curry type, where you do more of your damage off the ball, or are you like slashing, something like where you're like more like a pass offense. Beginning of the season, you saw the offense that like the more ball sharing offense to start off the season, and ever since the James Harden trade, you watch the Brooklyn Nets now. It's like the old Rockets teams now again.
So
It's literally him dribbling up the ball, trying to make every decision, trying to just take over the team, and you can see everybody's disgruntled. Like everybody doesn't know when they're going to touch the ball. He gets some open shots, but then, like if you haven't touched the ball for so long, you just can't expect like I'm going to hit them all. Like you have Joe Harris's of the world who will hit them, but like other players won't.
Once again, everyone, thanks so much for tuning into the Bill and Pablo show. If you enjoy our content, if you enjoy me whipping Bill, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I'll see you on the next video. Peace.